Miki mamusia zmarła, to on doszedł do mnie, mamusia, ja już nie mam mojej mamusi więcej. To po 3 dniach mu powiedziałam, teraz ja jestem twoją mamusią.
גרטרודה, שמהרגע הזה אני קורא לה אימא, כן? והיא ביקשה ממנה שתשבע לה, שהיא תציל אותי ותביא אותי לפלסטינה לאחר המלחמה. וגרטרודה נשבעה לאמי שהיא אכן תעשה זאת.
It was 1938. The air was thick with whispers of uncertainty. Across Europe, an ominous shadow stretched its hand, touching the lives of millions, leaving no one untouched. In a small Polish town, Gertruda Babilinska, a dedicated nanny to a Jewish family, felt that shadow inching closer. Little did she know, the path she would soon walk would demand unimaginable bravery, boundless compassion, and a courage that could only come from the heart. Gertruda had been caring for Michael Stolowicki, the young son of her Jewish employer, since he was a baby. To her, he was more than just a charge. He was the child of her heart. As tensions grew and the world seemed on the brink of chaos, Gertruda was faced with a choice that would test her loyalty and love. The Nazis were rising, whispers turned into roars, and families like Michael's were facing an uncertain, terrifying future. This story isn't just about survival. It's about a love so fierce that even the flames of war couldn't burn it out. It's about a woman who, with no weapons and no army, stood against unimaginable odds for the life of a child. Her actions would echo through history as a testament to the boundless strength of the human spirit. As whispers turned into loud warnings in 1939, Gertruda realized that the world was rapidly shifting around her. The family she worked for, the Stolowickis, knew they were living on borrowed time. The streets of Poland were no longer safe, especially for Jewish families. Gertruda saw the fear in the eyes of Michael's parents, Jacob and Lydia, who desperately sought a way to protect their beloved son. In the dead of night, Gertruda was woken by Lydia's trembling hand on her shoulder. Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. "If anything happens to us, promise me you'll take care of Michael." The weight of Lydia's words bore down on her heart, but Gertruda nodded, understanding the gravity of her promise. She knew without a doubt that she would protect this child as if he were her own. Days later, the unimaginable happened. Jacob fell gravely ill, and soon after Lydia was gone too, swept up by the relentless tide of violence tearing through Jewish neighborhoods. Gertruda was now all Michael had. She could have left, could have gone back to her own life, but she knew she couldn't abandon the child who looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes, unaware of the dangers lurking around every corner. And so, with a heart filled with both love and dread, Gertruda made the decision that would define her life. In the grip of war, every step could be a fatal mistake, but she had to try. For him. Gertruda packed what little she could carry, including a few precious keepsakes of the Stolowicki family. She dressed Michael in a plain coat, hoping that if they blended in, they might avoid suspicion. She whispered to him, "Stay close, stay quiet. We are on a journey. A long journey, my child." Michael clung to her hand, sensing her unease but trusting her completely. Together they ventured into the unknown. The roads were teeming with soldiers, faces void of empathy, eyes scanning for those they deemed undesirable. Gertruda knew that as a Catholic, she had an advantage. But Michael, his dark eyes and distinctive features marked him as Jewish. She couldn't erase his heritage, but she could shield him with every ounce of strength she possessed. The nights were cold, filled with the distant rumble of conflict, and Gertruda would often press Michael close, wrapping her arms around him to keep him warm and safe. She whispered stories to lull him to sleep, recounting memories of brighter days, hoping to fill his young mind with visions of peace. The journey through Nazi-occupied Poland was perilous. Gertruda knew they couldn't stay in one place for long, as anyone could betray them in exchange for rewards from the authorities. Moving from town to town, she relied on the kindness of strangers and sometimes the cover of sympathetic Polish families who risked their own lives to help the two fugitives. But even with their help, food and shelter were never guaranteed, and each day felt like a gamble between life and death. Michael's young spirit endured despite the hardships, but Gertruda worried constantly. At any moment, they could be discovered. She had heard stories of entire families vanishing overnight, homes burned, children like Michael taken away to unimaginable fates. The fear was a constant presence, pressing down on her shoulders, but she couldn't let it show. One evening, Gertruda met a priest in a small village who offered them sanctuary for the night. He gave Michael a warm meal, and after speaking with Gertruda, handed her forged identity papers that could potentially save their lives. These papers identified Michael as a Catholic, obscuring his Jewish heritage, and were vital in a world where survival often depended on false identities. Gertruda's heart ached at the need to deny Michael's roots, but she knew it was necessary to keep him safe. Every encounter, every town, held new risks and new fears, but Gertruda was relentless. As they traveled, Gertruda taught Michael simple prayers and customs that aligned with her own Catholic faith, hoping to protect him further in case they were questioned. She encouraged him to memorize his new name and background. These lessons were painful for her, as well as for Michael. They had to become second nature for his survival. The journey seemed endless, and as months turned into years, Gertruda and Michael eventually reached Vilnius, Lithuania. Here they found brief respite. Life in Vilnius was not without danger, but it was easier to blend in. Gertruda found modest work, earning just enough to provide for herself and Michael. She knew they were far from safe, but at least they had a roof over their heads. Then, in 1941, tragedy struck again. Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and Lithuania fell under Nazi occupation. Vilnius, once a haven, was transformed into a place of horror, with the Jewish community forced into a ghetto. Once more, Gertruda and Michael were in danger. In this new reality, Gertruda's commitment to Michael only grew stronger. With every passing day, she knew that she was his only lifeline. She resolved to shield him from the hatred and violence around them, from a world that seemed determined to rob him of his future. The Vilnius ghetto was a world of despair, with families packed tightly into small, squalid quarters, rationed food, and little hope of escape. The once bustling Jewish community was now confined, its people stripped of freedom and dignity. Gertruda and Michael knew that remaining here would only bring them closer to danger. They had to keep moving. Through whispered conversations and carefully concealed notes, Gertruda learned of a possible escape route. The ghetto had connections with the local resistance, a network of brave souls risking everything to help people escape Nazi persecution. Gertruda knew the risks were enormous. The chances of being caught were high, and anyone found aiding them would face severe punishment. Still, the alternative was unthinkable. In the dead of night, Gertruda prepared to make her most daring move yet. With little more than a prayer and a handful of belongings, she and Michael slipped away, following instructions from a sympathetic contact within the resistance. Every step through the darkness felt like an eternity, her ears keenly alert to any sound, her heart pounding. She knew that if they were caught, it would be the end. Yet she pushed forward, clutching Michael's hand and whispering reassurances, even as her own hands trembled. Their journey led them to the Polish countryside, where they found shelter with a local farmer's family. This family, though initially reluctant, ultimately decided to help them. Michael was hidden in the cellar during the day, while Gertruda worked in the fields to earn their keep. Every moment in hiding was an exercise in patience and resilience, with Gertruda constantly alert to any sign that might betray them. After several weeks, word reached the countryside that Jewish children were being rounded up. Gertruda's heart sank. She knew this meant they would have to move again. Each journey became harder than the last, the resources fewer, the dangers greater. Still, Gertruda's determination to protect Michael never wavered. Through Poland, Lithuania, and even as far as Germany they moved. With each new place, they relied on forged documents, the kindness of strangers, and Gertruda's sharp intuition. She constantly adapted, learning which routes were safest, which towns had officials that turned a blind eye, and which families could be trusted. By the end of the war, they had traveled an unimaginable distance both physically and emotionally. They had seen humanity's worst, and at times its best, in the form of brave individuals who risked their lives to help others. When the war finally ended, Gertruda was able to take Michael to safety in Israel, where he could begin a new life. Her promise to his mother had been fulfilled, at great personal cost, but her love for Michael had carried them through. This remarkable journey serves as a powerful testament to Gertruda's unwavering courage and devotion. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, one person's love and sacrifice can change the course of a life. Years later, Michael, now a grown man, could no longer contain the depth of his gratitude and admiration for Gertruda. He knew the world needed to hear the story of the woman who had saved him. He approached Yad Vashem, the Holocaust memorial in Jerusalem, to recognize Gertruda as one of the righteous among the nations. For her, this gesture was unexpected. She hadn't seen her actions as extraordinary, but simply as a duty to a child she had loved. Yet for Michael, honoring her legacy was more than a tribute. It was a way to ensure that her bravery and kindness would be known to future generations. In 1965, Gertruda Babilinska stood before a gathering in Jerusalem, receiving the honor of righteous among the nations. Beside her was Michael, the boy she had saved, now a man carrying the resilience she had instilled in him. As the recognition ceremony unfolded, Gertruda's story resonated deeply with the audience. She was no longer just a survivor or a caregiver. She was a hero whose courage had changed the course of a life, a symbol of hope during one of history's darkest periods. Standing there, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She had kept her promise to Michael's mother, guiding him to a future his parents had only dreamed of. She had not only preserved a life, but nurtured it, raising Michael to honor his roots and to stand with pride for those who came before him. As the years passed, Gertruda's name became intertwined with Michael's life story, a bond that outlived both war and sorrow. Michael never stopped speaking of her, sharing her courage and kindness with his own children. They knew her as Grandmother Gertruda, a name spoken with awe and gratitude. She was more than a caretaker. She was the heart that kept their family alive, a hero whose actions had changed the fate of generations. In honoring her, Michael wasn't just recounting history, he was preserving the values Gertruda had instilled in him. He often gathered his children around, retelling the story of a young boy and a brave woman, stranded in a world that seemed bent on tearing them apart, yet bound by a love that couldn't be broken. His children grew up knowing that their existence, their safety, and their happiness were possible because of her sacrifices. For Gertruda, life remained modest, as it always had been. She found solace in seeing Michael grow, in watching him build a family, and a life she had fought so fiercely to protect. Her legacy became a quiet force that rippled outward, inspiring those who heard of her bravery, and each person she touched carried forward a piece of her spirit. And even after Gertruda was gone, her story found new life in places she could never have imagined. Michael, as he aged, began to write. He wanted to capture every detail of their journey, from their desperate escapes to the moments of peace they had stolen amid the chaos. His book became a tribute, a written testament to the strength of one woman who had defied the cruelties of the world to preserve innocence and hope. The book resonated with readers across generations, echoing Gertruda's resilience and the depths of her heart. Survivors, their families, and young people discovering this history for the first time found inspiration in her story. People began to see her not just as Michael's savior, but as a universal symbol of courage, a woman who stood unwaveringly against fear and hate. Gertruda Babilinska, the unassuming nanny, became a name celebrated for its quiet, yet immense power. Decades later, schools in Israel included her story in their history lessons, ensuring her bravery would never be forgotten. Gertruda's legacy had outlasted her own lifetime, proving that love, even in the darkest times, could be the most powerful resistance of all. Michael's book, titled A Promise Kept, became a quiet sensation. It was not just a personal memoir, but a historical account that shed light on the acts of courage that often go uncelebrated. As readers turned its pages, they were transported to the harrowing days of World War II, where Gertruda's presence brought warmth and light to a story shadowed by loss. Her name, once known only to a few, now resonated in households, classrooms, and libraries across the world. One evening, Michael received a letter from a teacher in Israel. She shared how she had read his book to her students, young teenagers, most of whom had grandparents who had survived the Holocaust. "I could see their eyes light up," she wrote, as they heard about a woman who was not famous or powerful, but who chose love over fear. They began to understand that heroes can be ordinary people, people like their own grandparents. The letter moved Michael to tears. He hadn't set out to be an author or to spark such a profound response. He had only wanted to tell the story of the woman who had saved his life. And yet, here he was, witnessing how Gertruda's legacy had become a beacon of hope for the next generation. Soon, schools from around the world began reaching out, inviting Michael to speak. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking had never been his calling, and the memories were sometimes painful to relive. But he knew that sharing Gertruda's story was an opportunity to remind people of the boundless courage that ordinary individuals could possess. He traveled to schools, libraries, and museums, retelling their story with the same care and detail Gertruda had given him as a child. One particular event took place at a school in New York. After Michael finished speaking, a young girl approached him, her eyes bright with emotion. She held his book tightly in her hands. "My great-grandmother was in hiding during the war too," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say thank you for sharing Gertruda's story. It makes me feel closer to my own family." As he traveled, Michael came to understand that Gertruda's legacy was not only his to carry, it was shared by every person touched by her courage. Gertruda's story became more than a chapter in history. It became a reminder of resilience in the face of impossible odds. In honoring her memory, Michael had unknowingly forged a connection between past and present, between the lives saved and the lives inspired. And in every story he shared, he could feel Gertruda's spirit, quietly encouraging him, guiding him as she always had. As his book continued to reach readers across continents, Michael felt a deep peace settle within him. He knew that he had kept his promise to Gertruda, just as she had kept hers to his mother all those years ago. The legacy of love, sacrifice, and courage that had once saved a single child had blossomed into a symbol of hope for countless others, illuminating the darkness with the light of one extraordinary woman's unwavering heart. As Michael's book reached wider audiences, it sparked an unexpected movement of remembrance and gratitude. Readers, many of whom had been unaware of Gertruda's story, were moved to reflect on the unsung heroes in their own lives. Michael began receiving letters from people across the world, descendants of survivors, children of resistance fighters, and everyday people inspired by Gertruda's courage. Each letter was a testament to the impact of one woman's love and bravery, and Michael kept every single one, feeling as if he were safeguarding Gertruda's legacy once more. One letter in particular stood out to him. It was from an elderly woman in Poland who described how her own parents had been saved by a Polish neighbor during the war. She had grown up hearing about the quiet bravery of those who risked everything to protect others. "Reading about Gertruda felt like reading about my family," she wrote. "Your story has given me courage to share our own." Michael realized that Gertruda's story was not just about her or about him. It was about every act of humanity and selflessness that had taken place during those dark years. And through his book, countless other stories were finally being told, finally given the recognition they deserved. One day, Michael received an invitation to speak at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the very institution that had honored Gertruda years before. It was a humbling request, standing before a crowd of Holocaust survivors, their families, and historians. Michael recounted the story of the promise Gertruda had made to his mother and the incredible lengths she had gone to fulfill it. As he spoke, he noticed tears in the eyes of those around him, each person undoubtedly recalling their own journey of survival, their own memories of loved ones who had done whatever they could to protect others. Afterward, a man approached him, his face lined with age but his eyes bright with gratitude. "My wife was saved by someone like Gertruda," he said softly. "People like her. They are the real heroes of history." Michael nodded, feeling a surge of pride not only for Gertruda, but for all those who, like her, had chosen love over fear, compassion over safety. He realized that her legacy had become a part of something far greater, a collective remembrance of courage that transcended time, a universal story of humanity at its best. Years later, Michael found himself at a ceremony where a memorial plaque was unveiled in Gertruda's honor. It stood in a quiet garden, surrounded by olive trees and wildflowers, bearing her name and a simple inscription, "For the love and bravery that knew no boundaries." Michael placed his hand on the plaque, feeling as though she were there beside him, her spirit as vibrant as it had been during their perilous journey together. With a deep breath, he spoke softly, as if to Gertruda herself. "You've not only kept me alive, you've given hope to countless others." And in that moment, he felt at peace, knowing that her story was alive, woven into the fabric of history, living on in the hearts of people across generations. Gertruda Babilinska's legacy had become timeless, a testament to how the actions of one courageous soul can ripple through history, lighting the way for countless others.